Hey y'all, it's Sarah. I am up doing some really late night crafting. I've got an idea. I've got to get it out of my head, and I thought I would turn on the camera and share with you. This one's got a new paint technique with it, so that'll be fun. I have got everything laid out, ready to jump in. I'm going to roll through the supplies really quick and we'll get started. So if you notice, I have a couple things sitting here. I've got some Dollar Tree kind of 3D stickers. They're like a plasticky material. I've got some Dollar Tree self-adhesive hooks. I've got one of the Dollar Tree black furniture markers. It comes in a 3-pack, but we're using the black one. I've got one of the chalk writers in this gold color. I've got my Dollar Tree kitchen sponge. Got a couple of paints here. We're going to be using hazelnut and ink. And the wax is kind of an optional one if you just want to add a little more texture to our hooks. But I do have that one out. I've got some hot glue. And as you can see, I've got some foam core. So I've got 1.5 inch by 30 inch strips. There are 7 of these. And we're going to cut them in half and get 1.5 by 15 inch strips. We'll have 14 of those all together. I've got these 2.5 inch strips. There are 4 of those, and we're going to cut those down as we go. If you're not familiar with what this material is, this is Readi-board brand foam board. This is the stuff like you find in your office supply section. You find it next to your school supplies at most of your retailers, Wal-mart, Dollar General, Dollar Tree. It comes in 20 by 30. I always recommend cutting it at the 30-inch length because that's how it's manufactured and you get smoother edges that way. So I've already got mine cut down. I want to jump into the paint technique for this one. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to paint your hooks. These are white. They come in white, silver. I'm getting that first black coat on there. Usually I spray paint these, but it is late at night, so I'm chalk painting this. And just trying to make sure that I get down all in there. I don't want to leave brush strokes, so that's why I've got this other brush sitting here. This one just gave me quick coverage. So really quick, this one that's got this really bristly texture, I'm just kind of tapping it on there and giving it this wrought iron type texture. I'm just using the ink color, and with its own thickness, it gives it a nice texture. You're going to want to do at least 3 of these so that you can attach them to your finished piece. You're going to want to set those to the side because we're actually going to do a couple more steps to that, but I want to let that black part dry really well first. We're going to want to do the same thing with our hinges. So I'm using these particular hinges. They've got nice dimension to them, and you can use the color just as they are, but because of the other colors I'm going with, I'm just going to tap a little of this ink color on here. Kind of age and distress it some. Hopefully you guys can see what I have done. I'm just going to come in with a dry sponge and sponge a little of that down so it leaves some of the metallic. So you do both of your hinges, or honestly, there's some great hinge choices on here. This is just what I decided to go with. Now we're ready for the paint technique on our black strips. You can see this is the 1.5 by 15 strips that I'm talking about. And there is a different kind of paint technique that I'm using for these versus the slightly wider ones. So I'm doing a half a sponge. And the reason that is I need kind of the extra space on there to feather out this paint look. So I'm kind of using one to saturate, and the other end is staying a little bit cleaner to feather out my look. And you can kind of see how that has occurred. So I'm going to come into this hazelnut. And I'm getting it on this end. And you can kind of see maybe that I am spreading just ever so thin across here. You want to get the sides on these 1.5 by 15, but you don't really have to worry so much about the ends. So now that I've done that, I'm going to take this and start flicking it. Hopefully you guys can see that. Let's see if I can get it a little darker here. So maybe you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm feathering that out with this other end if I get it on too thick or too heavy. I did go a little bit more on these inner strips just because I wanted them to really stand out. So what this is mimicking is if you've seen black paint distressed and then it's sanded down along the edges and the wood is exposed, that is kind of the look this is giving you. And maybe you can kind of start seeing how that appears. I can soften it. And you're just going to want to go all the way down both sides of all of what should be now 14 1/2 inch or 1.5 inch by 15. Whoops. See what I mean about getting it really heavy there? I'm going to try to use that drier side and buff that down a little. So your ends, when you get ready to do them, you can put a little more emphasis on those. And you really can take this as far as you want to. So now that I've shown you the skinny ones, and we've got a much wider kind of edge there, when it gets to these thinner ones, my first step is, normally I would paint this. However, the black, if you notice, even amongst itself, can be different tones. When that paint spills over, it can really affect the rest of your paint job. So I'm taking a cheater's root with this black furniture marker, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to hit all of these edges just like this, where there's not a lot of bleed over. When we do this color, this hazelnut color, it's going to cover a good majority of this from our edges, and you can kind of see. So you're going to want to do this to all of your 2.5 inch pieces, because those are going to be outer edge pieces. If you want to go ahead and try to paint them with black, you can. Just try not to get over the edges this direction like we can tend to do when we paint those edges. And I'm just going to continue to go in and do all of my edge work on my 2.5 inch pieces. And then I'll show you the paint technique that I used on those. So now that I have my edges filled in and it's a little more solid, I'm going to come in here and we're basically going to do the same thing, except for we're not going to feather it out as much. So I'm just barely lining that. Now, I will say on my ends, I am going a little heavier. And I'm blending that out. So I'm going to continue to go down on my 2.5 inch pieces. Just kind of that nice, thin, barely exposed wood line, basically. And when it's up against the other ones, you're going to see how that stands out. Guys, I don't know if you see that perforation there, That's where the machine kind of chomps these. Come in with just a Dollar Tree sanding block on the fine grit. And just smooth that down a little. Be careful because you can mess with the integrity of your piece. But if you want to smooth those ends out, it's a really good way to do it. Same thing here. Now once we cut these down, we're going to have to come back in and redo these ends. So I'm doing the same thing though to show you a little better. Or a little more. So I'm going a little darker with that. This is meant to mimic the sanding. You can see how that looks. Hopefully you guys can see kind of how that looks. So you're going to do kind of that edging method on all of these 2.5 inch strips. And then we're going to trim those down as we go and assemble this little cutie. I'm going to do those ends a little. Can you see that? I've got it really close on me so that you could see the kind of details of that. So I'm coming back in and smoothing that a little. You can kind of see how that looks. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to lay all my pieces out so we can start to assemble. So here is my dry 1.5 inch pieces, and now you can kind of see once it dries that pigment really shows up, and you can see where we feathered that out a little more on those edges of these than we did on the thicker pieces. I am just going to kind of lay these out, hopefully find a pattern that I didn't accidentally get fingerprints on. I don't think it would be a project for me if I didn't get fingerprints on it somewhere. So now you can kind of see, it looks like these have been sanded down to raw wood. My next step is going to be to try to get some alignment going on here. So I'm just going to take one of my thicker strips here and get that bumped into place. It would help if I didn't unbump it. So I'm going to use my longest one that has not been cut down yet, and I'm reaching all across really funny. We're not even using a backer for this. This is why this is a one sheet deal. When you do the math, this comes down to one full sheet of foam core, which I think is really exciting. So we want to cut one of these 2.5 by 30 inch strips down. And this is what I said, one of the ends you might not see, so you were going to have to repaint it anyway. So a couple of my shorter ones, I actually cut these down because I knew I was going to be struggling with size here. So I'm going to slide these up a little bit and maybe show you what I'm doing. So we're going to align these. Can you see where we're going with this, guys? And then I've got that one trimmed down, but I've got to paint the other edge. This was one of the ones I wanted to make sure that I knew where it was going to line up first. So there's 14 of these 1.5 inch strips. It comes out to a weird 21, I think it's like 21 and a half. on your width. But I just laid mine down and marked it. That's why I didn't give you measurements, because if you have a little more gap in one, between one slat than you do the next, that can be off a hair. So now you can see over the top of this black how that detail looks. I really love this look. So my first step in order to try to maintain the stability is I want to get this one long piece here at the top. I'm going to drag in another piece and slide this down. Bump all of these together. Everybody's kind of joined with their buddies. I'm going to take one of the 2.5 inch by 30 inch ones. I am loading this thing up with hot glue. I am really loading it down. And I'm not putting it on this piece right there. That piece was just there to help me align it. So you can see where I'm going with this. So this is going to help keep some stability right here until we can get these other pieces assembled. Now, I'm leaving some length on these, and this little kind of detail that I'm going to add is completely optional. So you can see there's some extra length down through here. Now, when we hit this, because this is 1.5 inch and this is 2.5 inch, we're going to have this overlap that's going to help keep it stable. So when you align your glue across here, make sure it goes far enough across this thing to hit both of those to stabilize. And I'll show you what I mean. So you can kind of see there, I want it to go all the way across that. Make sure it's hitting both of those two slats there. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Got to reload my glue. I'm definitely using a lot of glue on this because we don't have a backer piece. This is a single sheet project. I'm making sure that I use plenty of glue. Okay, so now we're down to this piece. I do have to trim it to fit it down. I figured I would. In order to do that, I'm going to kind of tell you what this measures out to be. This piece here is going to be about 17.25. And I'm just butting it up against here, marking it. And that's where I'm going to trim it so I can fit it right into this spot. I'm just using my plain razor blade. I'm starting above my cut, slicing right on through. And I do want to make sure that I have a little more paint detail to this cut end. Now that I have that trimmed, I'm going to go ahead and pop it in its place and glue it down. Same thing, I want to load the back of this with glue so that it attaches all those independent pieces a little better. You can always put a backer on this piece, but I was trying to come up with something that could be a one sheet project and still end up with something that looked fairly substantial. If you want to beef it up a little and add a backer to it, you're more than welcome to. I think that would be good too. I just wanted to try to get a single sheet project done. So here we are at this stage, and I want to do a little bit of trimming down. So this overhang piece that I have right here, I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. Like I said, I did it this way because I knew that when you were aligning those 14 individual slats, Sometimes you need a little wiggle room if you don't get them jointed up close enough. You need a little playroom there. So here's where I said that I was going to do a thing, and you don't have to do the thing the way that I'm doing the thing. You could come right now and trim this completely across right here the same way we just did that other edge. Just trim along here and have just this one piece unit. However, I, for some reason, really liked the little bit of overhang. So I'm going to come down probably about 2 inches right here and trim that down. And I'm going to do the same thing. And when I say 2 inches, I'm coming 2 inches from this bottom little ledge that we've created. So just to beef that up a little, I'm going to add this back into it just to do it. Like I said, this was just one of those weird, quirky parts where I wanted to do it to mine. You don't have to do this part to yours. You can have it totally flush along this bottom. And I bet I can do this off of this one little scrap of a piece. It sure looks like I can. I'm going to flip over and do the very same thing here. And it looks like I'm actually going to have to trim it. I have a little bit extra too. And this was just, I don't know, as I was dry fitting this together, I had the overhang because I wanted to leave the wiggle room on measurements. And once I got to looking at the little overhang there, I really kind of liked it. So I decided I wanted to leave it on mine. I was catching my blade on my ruler. So of course I want to come in and hit those with paint the same way we've done all the other edges. So here is the stage where I said adding the antique is optional. You could come in right now on your black hooks and just add a little more texture to that by kind of splatting it on. It mutes that rich black color just a little bit. And we're going to do one more step to that. So this is the gold chalk writer marker. And you can see that this is not actually a marker, guys. This is like a wax pencil that rolls up. So I'm going to take just a little around the edges. You can see that. I'm going all around the shape here. I'm going to hit the sides and just along this bottom. I pretty much have traced this thing, if you can see that. So now that I have, I'm just going to take my finger and rub across there. Now this gives kind of this, I don't know what you'd call that finish. Hopefully you can see that. It tones them down quite a bit from just the jet black on this piece. I've done it to this also after we let that black dry. I've come in, hit some of those surface areas a little bit. It was already metallic, but the color that I wanted that gold undertone a little bit more to match the tones that we kind of inserted in our wood. So now that I've done that part, you can always come in again and add a little more of the antique to even texturize that more. Now that we have our piece assembled and we've got some accessories, we're going to go ahead and attach some accessories. I feel like this thing right here is pretty sticky. Hopefully that proves to be true. I'm going to take it right up against this edge and pop it right in place. You could always add a little hot glue underneath it if you wanted to, or if you felt it was necessary. And you can see just how thick those are. They have a lot of realism, especially once you throw a little paint on those. So I'll pop that in place. I'm going to come down here, grab my ruler, and I want to find the center. So roughly about this slot right here. And you can see how that muted that dark down some, still giving it that kind of metallic look. So I'm just aligning it with the slat over here and then that center one. I have removed all the sticky backing from these just so I could glue them straight down. I'm coming in with just my hot glue. Now, mind you, this is mostly for looks, guys. You can hang some lightweight things off of it. If you've seen some of my other pieces like this, you've seen me hang little things off of it. I'm certainly not going to recommend hanging your coat off of this, but something lightweight is going to be just fine. And that also depends on how you've got it stuck on your wall, too, on what's going to hold up to it. So I've got all of these kind of in place. I'm wondering if you can see kind of that look, that metal look to that. I'm going to move all this out of the way. So you can kind of see here how I've got mine styled. I've just got a little DIY cotton wreath that I made from Dollar Tree items. I wanted to show you a couple more options. Dollar Tree has their little metal words. You can always find some of the wood words. They've got their windmills right now. If you've got a monogram that you could use, that's super cute. You guys see, I don't know why I wanted to keep that down there. I just thought it was fun. You could go Easter with this and put a little Easter friend and maybe hang his carrots down from the hooks, which would be pretty cute. So there's a lot of options there, but this is such a fun piece for being a one foam core sheet project. You can kind of look, see if I'll let you get a little detail in there. I love how this turned out. I can't wait to do a few more. I could not sleep until I got this out of my head. But I'm pretty excited by the end results. I think it's pretty cute. It's something a little different, but I hope you guys like it. I hope it at least gave you some ideas and got you thinking. Maybe introduced you to a few new items, because these hinges and things, those are new to me. So I was pretty excited to see those. And that's all I got for you guys. I hope that you get a chance to do a little crafting. Maybe not in the wee hours of the morning, but hope you get a chance to. And I'll talk to you guys soon.